Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to our coverage of the New In Chess Classic. This is a rapid online tournament, part of the Champions Chess Tour, and today is the first day of the quarterfinals. We have Magnus Carlsen taking on Teimour Radjabov, Wesley Aronian and Wesley Aronian, Hikaru Nakamura and Hikaru Liem, and Shakh and Alireza Firouzja. The way it works today is they are going to play 3 or 4 games of rapid. The winner of today's mini-match takes a lead into tomorrow, and then overall there are 2 rapid mini-matches. If it's 1-1, then they play blitz on the second day, okay? So I'm going to take you through some of the games. I'm going to take you through some of the stories. We're going to take everything on in round number 1. Hikaru plays Wesley Liem. He plays d4, d5. We have what's known as a Queen's Gambit declined, and we have this move a6. This move is tricky because it's intending to take on c4 and very quickly go for b5. Much more normal is knight f6, bishop e7, even the triangle system. And here Hikaru just takes on d5, says you're not going to take me, and puts his bishop on f4 and plays e3. Normally, and when I say normally, I mean about 95% of games in this position go bishop to d6, either a capture or just a retreat, trying to capture back with the h-pawn to open up the rook, and play just develops like that. But Liem plays a move that's basically played in, like, I don't know, 5% of games, even less, and almost by nobody, like, very strong, and that move is c5. And this seemingly harmless pawn trade is already a very big decision, because after just very simple development by both sides, and bishop to e6, this forces the game, that move c5 that Liem played, c5 all the way back on move 6, it forces the game into a pawn position, or pawn structure, known as an isolated pawn. Otherwise, black would have had a c-pawn to help its friend. Isolated pawns have no neighbors on E and D, or, I mean, that's at least in this case, no pawn neighbors on E and D. And an isolated pawn wants to be pushed forward and ultimately simplified with a move like d4. If you are playing against an isolated pawn like Hikaru is, you want trades, which is why he plays knight to e5, because should black take, you win control of the square in front of the isolated pawn, put something there, and then stockpile pressure on it and, remove its friends one by one, like Darts did to Yugi in the final duel, and then isolate the friend and try to capture it. So Liem tries to make a trade on his own terms. Liem basically gets this structure now. He has one weakness, but what he's able to do, as Hikaru tries to plant the pieces on these squares, is he's able to play c5. Now what Hikaru does is he brings his rook, moves his queen up 1 square to maybe go to a5 and play rook to d1, and plays this move b3. This prevents Liem from very easily playing c4. It prevents Liem from very easily playing d4. And the reason why Liem is not rushing with this move is because the queen wants to go here anyway. So it will go there, and then you'll apply pressure to these pawns, not allowing them to move forward. Liem plays rook c6, applying an extra layer of defense to the 6th rank. I don't fully understand this move, but I guess his intention was to put his queen behind his rook. Now both players throw in an H move because, it's always good to give your king a luft. Beginners, keep that in mind. Stop getting back rank checkmated. Bishop f3, and now we have a5. Now a5 is a big decision because it really weakens the b5 square, and it also just puts the pawn in the line of sight of the queen. Knight comes back to c3, rook to d8, and now Hikaru finally has all the things ready in the position to do something, so he does something, and the something that he does is the move e4. Point is, you can't take me because I'm going to take your rook, because you awkwardly coordinated your rook, queen, another rook. So now, Liem plays d4, and Hikaru strikes with e5. And the center's really open, right? This is hit. Knight comes here, and this knight comes to b5, attacking the queen, and the knight transfers into this square on d6. Looks very nice. And the pawns have trouble moving forward, all of them. Liem thinks for a while here, plays a very bold move, a4. The idea being that if the pawn gets captured, now you have doubled isolated pawns. Black has 2 passed pawns, by the way, now. And black will just go here, take the pawn back, and call you a bozo. Probably not, because they don't have chat turned on in the game, but that's what I would imagine. But Liem must have missed the power of Hikaru's next response, which you are more than welcome to pause and try to find. I don't have water with me today, so I'll just stare at my paper towel roll. Okay, and now the move is b4, because of 1 pin, 2 pin, red pin, blue pin. And the problem is that if you take, for example, with the queen, then I'm just taking you, and you have no response that's not going to lose material. You can't take with the pawn, because then I'm going to take, and take. You can't take with anything, which is why Liem very quickly bails out into an endgame with a massive sequence of exchanges where he's just down a pawn. Now, I don't know if a computer can draw this with black, but this position is extremely treacherous. If this bishop if this knight just turned into a bishop like that. I mean, I don't, it's like some Cinderella nonsense, but if it just did, this would be a draw, because again, opposite colored bishops, all the pawns on the same side, it's probably just a draw. I mean, that's what it is. However, ladies and gentlemen, you cannot turn knights into bishops with fairy dust, okay? That's not how it works. And for that reason, bishop e6, f4, I mean, Hikaru just starts rolling the pawns. And now, big decision, just because you can take en passant does not mean you should stop doing it. I know you do this. I know you do this. Don't lie. Look at me. Stop. It's an addiction. All right, you need help is what you need. So Hikaru leaves the structure and instead goes in with the rook. And he fights for these weaknesses. His king is always safe, no back rank mate. King g6, nice move here by Hikaru, h4. And that move basically forces h5. If black does not play h5, this pawn will always be used to deflect the king. And as we can see in a couple moments, that's exactly what Hikaru does. He deflects the king, he takes the pawn, takes, knight e8. Beautiful move. The idea to transfer the knight to f6, and because knight fights for a different color complex than the bishop, there's nothing that the bishop can do. It can't stop the knight from coming to a dark square, and once the knight lands there, he takes the bishop, and you say, well, why did Liem do that? Liem was trying to get into an endgame where this pawn doesn't exist. The problem is that's kind of a pipe dream, because it's always going to exist, and on move 48, he resigned. His king walked up the board to join its pawn. Very nice win for Hikaru, who takes a 1-0 lead in his mini-match. Very convincing first game, honestly. Like, from start to finish, that was very, very nice. Now, for our second game of the day, we have the game between Shakhriyar Mamedyarov and Alireza Firouzja. Now, what I compared this to a matchup of, like, a young and old boxer. All right, Mamedyarov is definitely the older of the two. He's much more experienced at this top level, but they both love a complex tactical exchange, an attacking game. And we get a Slav defense from Alireza, followed by a6. Now, a6 is not the most common move, but here's the idea. You want to play b5 and attack on this side of the board. Shakhriyar plays b3, keeping the tension. Alireza can't just win a pawn, because this is just idiotic for him to do. e4, bishop c4, he's going to lose the pawn back very quickly. You just can't hang on to it. I mean, bishop e6, knight g5. So, but that is Alireza's point, and when Shakh plays b3, he just turns to, you know, the other side of the board to play this move. Except he just doesn't do that. He plays bishop f5. Okay, fine, Alireza, fine. Bishop d3. Now, obviously, you take, and just develop and move on with life, right? No! Alireza plays e6. Okay, castles. Alireza might be the first person in human history to put all 8 pawns on the same color complex. Now, Alireza, you need to take this, okay? You need to take this. Why? What? Wait, I'm sorry. Why did you put 8 pawns on light squares, therefore drastically weakening your dark squares, and then trading off your dark... Yo, this is some chess I don't understand, y'all. I mean, the computer doesn't think it's even that bad, and it thinks that after knight d7, black is chilling. But I would yell at all of my beginner students if they played like this. Like, bro, just put your bishop on g7. So what does Shakhriyar begin to do? He's like, all right, I got the bishops, right? So let me play knight e5. Let me make a couple of exchanges and make a knight versus bishop game. Yeah, and he's right, because Alireza's position is like Swiss cheese. And he's the mouse. He's going to run through it with the dark squared bishop. Like, look, if you play a move like c5 here, for example, okay? And it's like the one pawn that you've landed on a dark square throughout the entire game, you've massively destabilized this knight. Like, I'm going to go f3. I will kick your knight out to this dumb square, and then I will just obliterate your pawns while your knight stands here drunk out of its mind and unable to move anywhere. Okay, we all have that friend. So, Alireza plays bc, and after another sequence of trades, exactly that happens, but Alireza is able to bring his knight back to e6. But if you just instant replay that, rook c1, because Alireza spent so much time in the opening comfortably getting his pieces to normal squares, he had to sacrifice a pawn. You could say, well, why didn't he play rook c8? Well, then I would have just belligerently attacked you on this diagonal with this. Or I would just say, you're not going to castle ever again. Like, my bishop is going to park right here, and this is the perfect example of bishop is better than knight. The knight can't touch the bishop. It just can't do anything. And you can't castle. So, Alireza got the knight and got castled, but he's down a pawn. And Shakh plays this move, and now is on the verge of winning a second pawn. So Alireza has to make a queen trade, even though he's down material. a3, and we get this endgame. And I mean, this game, the game is playing itself for Shakh. Like, he almost doesn't even need to think. So we get d4, takes. And now Alireza's made progress. He's made some progress, some progress, a little bit of progress. All right, let's see that Super Grandmaster endgame skill in action. King to f2, trying to bring the king, maybe g4 to stop knight coming back to f5. Alireza plays g5, good move. Because he wants to prevent Shakh from just expanding. Rook to d3, covering everything, pressure on the knight, rook c2, king to g3. I'm not really worried about checks because my king is always going to come out this way. All right, we repeat once, so I go this way instead. Fine, knight back to c6. And now rook d2, offering a trade of rooks. He doesn't want to trade of rooks? All right, we're going to infiltrate with the bishop. Rook a4, rook b2, and let's swap some pawns. Knight takes a3. Ladies and gentlemen, do you play bishop takes a3 in this position? I swear, if one of you said bishop takes knight, go find the nearest mirror in the house. Palm, face. What are you doing? Why would you trade your bishop for the knight? Just because you take, because you can take it, doesn't mean you should take it. Go attack the king and the pieces. The knight's got no moves. And what ends up happening is that, the rook. And now it's just easy. Now it takes a little bit of time, but rook versus knight, and Shakhriyar brings the king closer. Plays this nice move h4. Pawn can't take, knight would hang, and he simplifies. And now this very nice idea, rook d2, stopping the knight from coming. He's going to go rook d6. He's going to take, simplifying into an endgame where he is completely winning and just kings and pawns. Very nice game from Mr. Mamedyarov. He takes a 1-0 lead over Firouzja. And for our third and final game of the first round, we have this game between Wesley So and Wesley Aronian. Except we are not going to look at the game. What? Why would I click on a Gotham Chess recap video and get debated? Well, we were in this position on move 19. And the position is pretty much balanced. It came out of a London opening. And here Wesley So played the move rook to e2. And after bishop takes e2, he just lost the rook in one move. Well, Wesley So mouse-slipped. He meant to play rook e3, with the intention to play rook h3 and pin, and that would have been a game, but he played this, and people were like, well, Lev should just play this move, and then rook e1, bishop h5, but Lev on took, it's not against the rules to take, also queen h4 check and mate is not possible because the bishop covers, and so just some moves later, Wesley So had to resign, because he is just, I mean, frankly, his position is completely lost. So Wesley mouse slips in a completely equal position, giving Lev on a 1-0 lead, and Magnus Carlsen and Teimour Radjabov drew a game. And I mean, there was not much to show there. They just drew their game. But we are going to pick things up now in round number 2. All right? Wesley's out for revenge. I mean, that's what he's got to do. Wesley's out for revenge. So we have a London system. And it's funny because we just had a London system in their first game. Except the colors were reversed. It was Wesley playing the London versus Levon. I don't know what these guys are doing, but they're taking trips to Big Ben. And we have a London system where the queen comes out early to b6. And doesn't allow white to lazily play moves like rook to b1. At this point, the critical move, according to theory, is to take this pawn, deflecting the queen over to c5 and not taking here. Or the queen goes down. But now, the queen's in a bit of a stranded area, and it immediately gets attacked. Taking on a2 is possible, but it's a little bit dangerous after bishop b5. This pin is way too strong, and oftentimes this queen can get a little bit stranded with moves like knight b3, knight d4, etc. So rather than going for this, the queen hangs out on c3. Bishop b5, g6 has all been played before, and here Wesley Aronian plays a novelty. He plays a move that my computer doesn't realize is even possible. Probably he's worked it out with some sort of supercomputer, and that move is pawn to e4, which at surface level looks like it simply hangs a pawn with tempo. It does not, however. There is an idea. The idea is to play this move, attacking both, cannot be taken due to this pin, then taking, and saying, I'm better. And he's not wrong, he is better. Very good. So after e4, we got bishop g7, bishop e5, queen a5, and the most obscure sequence of moves you'll ever see. Pawn takes. You cannot take because you're bishop. Attack. Take. Here. Castles. He didn't take because he didn't want to. Remember we just saw this like a game or two ago in the Mamedyarov game, the same bishop. That's why you stick around. In chess, it's all about the patterns. Right? So castles, he sacrifices and plays this move. And now, Wesley So here must have received a message from some sort of alien colony that said, if you don't take on e7, we will spare your family. Okay? Because for the rest of this game, Wesley So refuses to take this pawn. Now, at this point, it's smart to not take this pawn, because otherwise knight c4 would win with queen coming here, attack on the queen, and the queen can't get back. He takes on c5. Now, he can take on e7 with the rook, not the queen. He refuses to do that again. Bishop to f5. Bishop to d4 now attacks the queen, and now you're not going to be able to take so easily. Rook b3. c5. Rook e5. Okay, what's worth more than a bishop? A queen. So now we get queen d7, bishop takes. Knight comes into e4. He also had knight g4 attacking the rook, but he goes this way. What's worth more than a bishop? What's worth more than a knight? What's worth more than a rook? Yeah, and a queen. Rook d3. Nice move from Levon. Queen b7, takes on e5, takes on e5, takes on e4, rook d8. Utilizing the piece that you didn't take. And now we have a weird position where, again, if you take this knight for free, you just lose. Rook takes this way. Because now if your rook takes, I have queen d8 check. Using my pawn as an 8th rank defender and promoting it. That is very important of how you deal with passed pawns. So we got king to g7. And this position is really good for white. It's really good for white because you're the only one with a dark squared bishop and you are attacking. Opposite color bishops favor the attacker. I say that a lot. And you say, well, black is up material. Really? Can you count knight, rook, rook, rook? Okay, black has 2 points extra. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Welcome to Gotham Chess Recaps, where we learn how to count. Except that's not what got played in the game. I apologize. I just clicked that square. So black's not up any material. It's knight and 2 pawns for a rook, and after f3, kicking out the queen, we got queen d4 lining up an attack on the king. Back rank check is not a problem because the king is going to hide. Takes, knight comes back to c4, and we have knight d6 and e8 on the way. So we get queen b1 check. King f2, queen takes a2 check. King runs out to g3. And here, Wesley plays this move. This move monitors the pawn from the other side. In fact, he could have played this move without even giving the checks. He could have just played queen e2 right away, and this king is here and not there. And you would think that the guy wants the king on g1 because it's safer, right? No. Actually, white wanted the king exactly where it ended up. White wanted the king on g3. Looks like black would want the king there. Wrong. Actually, black wanted the king on g1. I'll show you why, because after this, queen d8. And you can't take. I would make a new one. And now perhaps the most beautiful one. Queen e1 check. Bishop f2 in here. That's mate. The knight is hanging. The queen is hanging. What's the best move here for white? e8. But knight. Beautiful, right? Aren't you happy you stuck around 18 minutes into this video? Under promotion, live in a game. And now you take the pawn, because there's no checkmate on g5. And if you take the knight, I have knight d6, a forced sequence of moves. Knight f7, knight f5, queen comes back, now a beautiful move here. Not the best, I mean, you can mate in like 8 here, according to the computer, but bishop b6 is like mate in like 12. So, you know, Levon finding mate in 12 and not mate in 8, what a bum. The idea of bishop b6 is deflecting the queen away from pinning the knight. And now he comes back to d4. And the threat of bishop g7, knight f7, the king moving up. Sorry, queen g7, knight f7, all these moves. And Wesley resigned. What a game by Wesley Aronian. Whoever said the London system was boring. Now, every other game this round was drawn. So Magnus Radjabov drew. Hikaru and Liem moved to 1.5 half. And Mamidyarov moved to 1.5 half versus Firouzja. And what's funny is we're actually going to go to round 3 at the same exact match. Because now what Wesley needs is he needs to win to force a tiebreaker game. And Levon needs to put him away. And obviously I'm sharing the games with you that are the most exciting, right? So those are the games that we are going to look at. And we have c4, knight f6. And Wesley goes for this, the Mikenas Karls variation. This is one way using the English you can get out of the Nimso. Because the Nimso is bishop b4. Whoop, where are you going, bro? Bishop b4, this is the Nimso. But English players get Nimso players out of their comfort zone with this. This is what I used to do. Intermediate and advanced players take notes. Beginners just don't hang queens by move 7. Or pieces by move 6. So d5, takes, e5. Now, after knight e4, knight f3, bishop f5, pawn attacks knight, knight takes knight, pawn pawn c5, attacking for the center, knight c6 on the way, d4, queen to a5 attacking the pawn, bishop d2 protecting, knight c6 developing a knight, c4 counterattacking the queen and kicking it out, queen back to d8, queen to b3 attacking this pawn and this pawn. This is all theory. This looks like these dudes are inventing this. They're not. Apparently, this has been seen before at the Super GM level. Black sacrifices the pawn on b7 and lures in the queen, allows the pawn on d5 to get captured, and now this absolutely ludicrous move, pawn to e6, threatening queen takes f7 mate. And if bishop takes pawn, bishop b5 pins the knight to the king, which is very unpleasant. If pawn takes, then bishop b5, bishop f4, and this bishop can't guard the f7 square. And white is pressuring here. So Wesley once again plays a move that ignores a pawn capture and then just ignores the pawn. Now, according to the computer, if you just take here with the king and stop messing around, white is better. Black is better. Black is better. My engine might not be as strong as theirs, so now I'm thinking, did Wesley mouse slip? I don't think so. I think Wesley played this move deliberately. But these two guys provided us such trippy games throughout this day. Queen to a6, takes, and remember, Levon doesn't need to win this game. He just needs to not lose. So Levon with black is not taking a lot of risk. He's playing rook c2, plays queen c8, goes for a queen trade. Queen b8 in this position is kind of funny because this queen doesn't have a lot of moves, and it looks like you're just trapping it, but you're not. Castles, bishop b7, looks like the queen is trapped, but don't forget, I have this square. So we got queen c8 instead, takes, and again, Levon essentially took no risk. So how does a guy like Wesley So win a position of 2 rooks, 2 bishops, 4 pawns completely equal? 0.00, I am not joking. a4. Invest where you're strongest. Bishop d7, rook c4, bishop f5. Little bishop rodeo and get it back to d3 to try to put pressure on this pawn. So we get bishop b4, Levon's going for trades, and he accomplishes that, bishop c4. Now we have a very tricky move here, rook b1. Intention is that if rook takes rook, in between move, Zwischenzug on c4, check, and then I take your rook, and then I win the game. So we get rook takes a4. Now I give you a check, and I give you a check, and I give you a check, and now you're running towards me, and I like that. I like that very much. Come to, oh yes, oh absolutely. Now I'm going to go for these pawns over here, while this juicy king is just in the line of sight of all of my pieces. In fact, if black plays a move like g6 here, then after check here, I mean, you're suffocating, all right? Let's keep it honest. I mean, you're barely not getting mated. So for that reason, we got rook b4 with the intention to push. Now we got rook c1 with the intention to take, pin the rook to the king. That's not good. We move out of the way, and now a gorgeous move. And a move that if you are subscribed to the methodology of Benjamin Feingold, you will not play. And that move is f3. Ben Feingold's never play f3 makes sense, but not in this case, because the king needs to come to the party, and the king starts coming to the party, forcing the move d3. And after check king b6, we have a couple of checks, and the pawn is lost. And black has every problem they had in their position 10 moves ago, which is the ridiculous king, the pawn weaknesses, and the miscoordinated rooks. Except now you have another problem, and it's the fact that you put your own bishop in jail. Congratulations, you messed up, and you played yourself. Because now, Wesley's got a very easy life. His king hangs out in the middle, and he hunts down the enemy king and takes the bishop. You say, wait a minute, how did that happen? Wait, what? Well, he blundered a little combo here. He was trying to just give this away and take the rook. The problem is that I have a deflection check. Now, had that not happened, had like just the move h6 been played, Wesley just would have went for the 2 pawns. Like, Levon just can't move anything. And so ultimately, he ended up losing his bishop. This game went a little bit longer. Like, he had to be a little bit careful because this pawn is on the verge of promotion. But he just immediately got it, and king d2. And here, perhaps the most instructive moment of this game is that when you have king versus king, bishop, and h or a pawn, if the promotion square is not the same color as the bishop, okay, there are drawing chances, particularly if the defending king is in the corner already. If it's in the corner already, it's just a draw. because this bishop and pawn cannot kick it out. If it's on this side, you need a dark squared bishop, okay? But the problem with this endgame, my king shoulders yours, like in hockey, right? Or in football, the stiff arm. I'm not letting you get close to me. And so had they gone for a little run down this way, I just disallow you from getting to the corner completely, and I'll promote. And that's why this is winning, and that's why Wesley So gets 2-1. Meanwhile, we have more art school between Carlsen and Radjabov. We have another draw between Hikaru and Liem, and we have another draw between Mamedyarov and Firouzja, which takes us to the final round of the day, which is going to start with Alireza Firouzja needing to win against Mamedyarov. And he tries to do just that by playing just very standard Queen's Gambit stuff. And we have c5. This is called the semi-tarash. Takes, and normally here play goes e4, knight c3, bc3, cd4, cd4, bishop b4, bishop d2, queen d2, castles, bishop c4, or bishop to d3. Something like b6, bishop b7, maybe knight d7, castles, knight f6, rook e1, b6, rook d1, bishop b7, and you do something with this pawn or otherwise. Yeah, none of that happened because Alireza just played the move e3, knight c6, and he went for this position. This is actually known as the Pillsbury structure. And the structure is an interesting one because, again, we have isolated pawn, just like we saw at the very beginning of the video, and Alireza would love it if Shakhriyar did this, like knight takes c3. So, for example, if Shakh played like this move, okay? Because these pawns are very strong, and now you laser beam to this side of the board, and white has very good attacking chances here. But Shakhriyar didn't just, want to get obliterated, so he made Alireza work. Alireza sets up the cannon here with the queen, so we get knight e7, queen d3, knight g6. A prophylactic maneuver back to the g6 square. Bishop e3, b6, queen e4. Alireza is attempting to navigate the queen over here. But Shakhriyar is up to the task. He finds the best move once again. Knight to e7. Another backwards knight move, gluing it all together. And now the bishop is opened up on the long diagonal. Bishop to c2, rook c8, rook d1. And Shakh plays probably his biggest decision of the game, which is bishop takes knight. Okay, and this move. So he doesn't want the bishop. He also doesn't want white to have a knight attacking on the side of the board. You see this? You see that? You see that? Guarding both? Yeah, that's going to become very important. Also, Alireza can play this move, damaging the structure and just going for an endgame. He chooses not to do that. He chooses to bring back his bishop, setting up for another wave of attack. Takes. He decides to not trade queens. He parts ways with the a2 pawn. And he plays bishop takes h6. I don't know if Shakh missed that or analyzed it and was just not afraid. Obviously, you do not take just because you can, because then you're going to get queen f6 and get smashed. So you don't do that. Instead, you play knight h4 attacking the queen, and then you rotate the knight back. And you want this trade. You want it, because the less pieces white has to attack you, the better. So, bishop d2. Gets the bishop out of the way and guards the c3 pawn from the rook. And now we get g6, very solid. Now Alireza here needed to go all out. He needed to play h4, h5. This is a sacrifice, and here the engine just very cold-blooded, completely changes its mind and goes this way. First this move, hits the bishop. Now rook a1, rook a7, and computer's like, I don't understand. Black is winning. I mean, white is winning. Oh, also I guess the knight is hanging, so that was dumb of me. I guess this is better. And then rook a7, rook a1, rook a7. And, well, I mean, human beings are kind of committed to one side of the board. So rook a1 probably never crossed Alireza's mind, which is one of the reasons he played g3 in this position. But this one move gives black all the time that he needs to begin concocting a defense. He gets all the pieces back, and now he's just fast enough to prevent the h5 advance. He brings back the bishop, breaking the pin that the queen had on the king, and now Shakhriyar Mamedyarov plays a very nice move, e5. Just confrontational in the center, and, it's just a nice move. And Alireza is not equipped here to stop the break. Computer, again, gives some absurd engine line here, but I'm not even going to show it. Instead, Shakhriyar very cleanly gets all of Alireza's important pieces off the board. And in one final search for a tactic, if you take me, I will take your knight. Beautiful move here, knight b5. And again, Shakh kind of showing that he has two threats here, and Alireza is just going to lose material, which is exactly what happens. And Shakh just simplifies it down into a much better endgame. And Alireza resigns just some moves later here, because he's not going to deal with these two pawns. Shakhriyar showing once again that he's kind of the veteran boxer of the two, right? He ends up winning his mini match against Alireza Firouzja. Wesley Aronian came up short against Wesley Aronian. Carlsen Radjabov ended with 4 draws, those two getting their art school PhDs. And Hikaru, after that first convincing win, fended off the attempts of Hikaru Liem to fight back, and ultimately will take a 1-0 lead going into tomorrow. So every match has a leader. We have Hikaru leading. He will take on the winner of Mamidyara Firouzja if he were to advance. Carlsen Radjabov is all tied, and Aronian has a 1-0 mini-match lead over Wesley Aronian. Ladies and gentlemen, once again, thank you so much for hanging out with me these past 30 minutes. You are amazing. I'm hoping that these games entertained you. Hopefully I made you laugh as always, and it's the rare sight that you will see me without a video. This is what my neck looks like. I'll see you in the next recap.